just got to begin to chase a dream that is bigger than you.
Hello, thanks so much for popping in. My name is Kate Kinney. I'm a registered dietitian with Kanema Fitness, bringing another bite of nutrition information to you. August is National Wellness Month, and while we are always concerned about your wellness from head to toe and offering great tips to keep you well and healthy, this month I thought I'd focus on the wellness overall of your community and even of the planet as we talk about ways to eat healthy, but also reduce food waste, which is something that is important to think about, I think, not something that might come to mind every day. So I'm hoping to give you a little insight, maybe give you some tips to help you in your own home reduce food waste while still eating healthy and keeping your own health number one priority. Leading it off here, I thought we should talk a little bit about what does food waste mean? What is food waste? So there's a difference between food loss and food waste. Food loss occurs before the food even reaches the consumer, and it might have to do with overproduction or a mistake in production. If things might not have gotten stored properly or processed, or maybe something happened in the distribution phase that would where the food is considered not usable, that would be considered food loss. Where food waste refers to food that's really fit for consumption, but it is consciously discarded either at the retail location or once it gets to our house. So according to the USDA, 30 to 40% of our food supply is actually disposed of in the United States. So it never even gets used. And then 95% of that waste ends up in our landfills. Food is actually the largest category of material that you would find in our landfill. And the problem with that is that that food then releases greenhouse gas emissions, having a big impact on our community and our planet and our environment. And interestingly, the United States wastes the most food of any country. And that accounts for actually 6% of the greenhouse gas emissions out there is from our food waste. So interesting data here that really made me think. There's a really nice image that you'll see on your screen here that the USDA and the EPA have put together this food recovery hierarchy in order to reduce food waste. So you can see if you look at this image that they're talking about reducing volumes of surplus of food, like not even producing as much food if it's going to go to waste. And then if we do have overproduction, what can we do? How can we use that food to feed hungry people or use some of the scraps to help feed animals? You know, what can be used for waste and industrial uses? Obviously, composting. And then what we're really going to focus on, I wanted to give you this information sort of as a background so you can kind of understand why this is important and something that we should be concerned about. But we're really going to focus in quickly here on what can we do as consumers at our level to impact these figures and hopefully produce a safer environment for ourselves and our future. So, how are we as consumers contributing to this food waste? What's going on? Well, one thing is many of us are overbuying. We've all done this before. You buy too much and then you don't have time to eat it and it goes bad and you clean out the fridge and you throw it away. Some of that goes hand in hand with lack of meal planning. We buy this food without a specific plan of what to do with it, and then it just doesn't get used. Sometimes we waste food by not storing it correctly, not storing it at proper temperatures, or leaving it in the fridge too long when maybe we should have thrown it in the freezer, that sort of thing. And then misconceptions about best by dates. You know, if something is best by a certain date, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to throw it away at that date, or there's difference like sell by dates. When that date has passed, it doesn't mean you can't use it any longer. So there's a lot of confusion about that too. And what we want to do as consumers is really focus on zero waste cooking. So what that means is using as much of the foods that we purchased as possible. And we're incorporating shopping and storing strategies that waste the least amount of food. So what that means and what we're kind of focused on in the next few slides is to really buy only what you need, store it correctly, use a meal plan to help you use those foods. And then when you do cook and you have foods left over, um, making sure that they get used or you find a use for them. So that's where we're going to head with this information. So I think it's important to start with thinking about meal planning, and I'm going to explain that too in just a minute. And any of my clients, anybody who works with me in terms of nutrition knows that planning ahead is something that I really encourage all the time because in order to eat healthy and live healthy, it really requires a little bit of planning. Doesn't take a lot, but that little bit of time to plan can actually save you time in the long run and also hopefully save money and save food by not letting things go to waste. So when we have a plan, we know what we need and how we're going to use it. And when that happens, when we have a cognitive plan in place, we're much less likely to react emotionally. So, I had a bad day. I don't know what is going to happen for dinner tonight when I get home. I don't even want to think about what I have to do. I'm more likely to stop and, pick up some restaurant food, some fast food, something like that. Versus if I have a plan in place, I already know what's going to happen when I get home. I'm much more likely to stick to that. So planning ahead is really key, I think, for a lot of things, for your health, for preventing waste and all those things. So as far as 222, when I say meal planning, sometimes people get really panicky. Like, I am not expecting you to plan um, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 7 days in the week and write that all down. My goal is much less than that. Do you have a plan or can you create a plan for a couple breakfasts, a couple lunches, and a couple dinners in the week? And then when you have that plan and you can list out those ingredients, buy them, and make them, you're going to be able to repurpose some of that stuff. Hopefully you have some leftovers. So by planning a couple breakfasts, couple lunches, couple dinners, maybe even a couple snacks that you want to make sure you have for the week, you're going to be creating even more opportunities for yourself to eat those same foods. So don't let it overwhelm you. You can really start very simple here. So it's a good idea to plan a day, pick a day that you want to the menu plan. So for a lot of people, it's on a weekend. They have more time on the weekend, maybe on Sunday afternoon. You make up a quick plan of what are some ideas that you might want to make this week. You can make that list and then you either shop for it or you plan for when you're going to shop for it and when you're going to do a little bit of that meal prep. So really thinking about when that plan can take place is a great way to start. Once you have that plan, and maybe this is post your grocery shopping, which we'll get to in just a moment, can you prepare some of the staple foods? So, for example, coming home from the grocery store with some fresh veggies, say maybe you've got stuff growing in the garden right now. Tomatoes, cucumbers, bell peppers, carrots, celery, any broccoli, cauliflower, any raw veggies that you have and bring home, maybe you can rinse them off, cut them up, and throw them in a bowl, and they are ready to grab for lunches. Maybe you can hard boil some eggs that you can grab in the morning. You can throw in a salad for lunch, that kind of thing. Maybe you cook up some oatmeal that you then put in the fridge, and you can grab a scoop and heat it up every morning for breakfast. So that's what I mean by prepping staple foods as part of your meal planning process. And a lot of these things can happen while you're doing other things. So while you're making dinner tonight, throw in a pot of hard-boiled eggs or eggs. To make hard-boiled eggs just takes a few minutes. You're focused on something else. You're in the kitchen anyway. Might as well get that done. When you're meal planning, if you can think about ways to make extra or batch cook. So if you have 4 people in your family and you want to make chicken, can you cook a little bit of extra chicken and have that left over and work that into your plan as well? So if we're having chicken on the grill tonight, maybe tomorrow we can make quesadillas with that chicken, for example. I've got some ideas here too. When you get kind of in a rut with what to do with your meals, think about things like Meatless Monday. Maybe that's an opportunity to try a meatless meal with a bean based or tofu, or maybe it's eggs or something like that. Taco Tuesday. We do tacos almost every week in my house, but they're not always the same. They might be chicken in the crock pot with salsa and some seasoning. It might be fish tacos. It might be ground beef tacos. We mix it up, and then that always goes with some veggies on the side. Fish, you want to get some fatty fish twice a week in your diet, 2 servings. So maybe fish on Friday is a good way to do that. And so when you're meal planning, maybe you can think about some of those things that might help you with coming up with some ideas. And I think it can be really helpful if you're not on your own. If you do live with others, ask other people for ideas, get them involved. They can help with the planning or the shopping or the food prep, so it doesn't all have to fall on one person, if it would help to make the meal planning and the prepping a little bit easier for the week. So just some thoughts on meal planning. Again, start small. It doesn't have to be a perfect plan, perfectly executed, but some ideas are really going to give you a really great head start. Okay, so once we have this plan made, we've got a list. We know sort of, we've got an idea for a couple of lunches, a couple of dinners that we want to have during the week. Let's make a list of all those ingredients. Now, I would encourage you first, like soon, because most of us probably haven't done it in a while. Take an inventory. What's in your fridge? Clean it out. Um, what is in your freezer? Anything that you've had shoved in the back of your freezer, if it's still safe to use, if it hasn't been in there for years and years, pull it forward. So anything going in the freezer after that can go behind it. Okay. So you're using the older stuff first, but make sure you know what's in there. And same thing with your pantry. Maybe you continue to buy boxes of pasta or grains and you've already got some tucked back there. Same thing with canned goods. So we just don't want to let food go to waste because we don't even realize it's in there. So take inventory, make a list for the week. Maybe when you take inventory, that actually helps you create your list for the week. Perhaps then you can use up some of those ingredients. So you make your shopping list of what you need to fill that plan that you just came up with. Think about using canned fruits, vegetables, like tomatoes and beans, and canned meats like tuna and salmon can be really helpful. Things that you can keep around that they're not going to spoil for a long time. Box grain, same things, brown rice and quinoa or whole grain pastas, your oatmeal, stuff like that. Having that around really lets you have some variety in your meals, and have go-to stuff available when you're not sure how to repurpose some foods. You'll have that stuff in your pantry to help you use it. And actually they can help you save money. And maybe even by having frozen vegetables in your freezer, it's going to help you eat more vegetables. People tend to not want to buy too much fresh stuff because they're afraid it'll go to waste. But if you've got stuff in the freezer, that's great to use when the fresh stuff is gone. Um, Making a grocery list, bringing it with you when you're at the store. That's something that I'm guilty of, making the list and forgetting to bring it. Take a picture of it, do the list right in your phone. There's plenty of apps that can help you organize your list. So have that with you. And then when you're shopping, stick to that list. Avoid impulse buys. So if you're thinking, I'm going to get a couple fruits for breakfast and for snacks, but then you impulse buy, maybe you're really hungry when you go to the grocery store and you see this other packaged snack and you buy that. Now your fruit is more likely to go to waste because you bought something else for that snack time. So avoid those impulse buys, and it's going to help you probably stick to a healthier food intake too when you just eat what you and buy what you've planned for. Make sure there's a plan for everything in your cart. If you're looking at something, you're like, question yourself, am I really going to use that? Am I going to need that? And if not, don't buy it yet. Wait till you need it. Um, don't buy food just because it's on sale. It can be tempting to load up on something. If you plan to throw it in the freezer, great. That's perfect. That's a great way to save some money. Or maybe you were going to buy some strawberries, but there's a really great deal on blueberries. Buy the blueberries and save the strawberries for next time. If you can replace it, great. But don't buy all the food you planned and then buy extra because it's on sale. Because if you end up wasting it, it's not saving you any money anyway. So think about that. And then buying ingredients that have multiple uses, or finding ways to reuse ingredients. For example, I used a recipe the other day that it called for like half a cup of black beans. So I opened a can and now I have the rest of the black beans in my fridge. So I really want to make sure that I use that this week. So we're going to do a grain bowl with brown rice, scrambled egg, black beans, salsa, avocado, and some veggies in a bowl. Really easy, quick meal that I can help use up some of those other ingredients. So think about ways that you can sort of share ingredients for a couple of different recipes. Now, food storage, I mentioned at the beginning that sometimes we result in food waste results because of food storage problem. So just something to check. Think about checking your refrigerator. It should be no warmer than 40 degrees. Ideally, 38 to 40 degrees is a good place Fahrenheit for your refrigerator, and your freezer should be at zero. It should be at 0 degrees. Use that freezer. So when you come home with meat, for example, and you're not going to use it in the next couple of days, make sure it's tightly wrapped, it's air sealed so it'll last, and put it in the freezer. Anything that you're not going to use right away, using the freezer for foods you've already made and you're not going to use in the next couple of days, throw it in the freezer. So I'm talking about meat, but also things like cheese and butter. You can freeze it. If you bought too many packages of cheese, you don't think you're going to get through it, throw some in the freezer, no problem. And then you throw it back in the fridge to thaw, the day before you need it the next time. So really think about using that freezer. And I referred to this on a previous slide, first in, first out. So whatever went in the freezer first should come forward, and you can use that first before you use the stuff behind it. So that's just going to help you from letting things go to waste. Also, consider buying clear containers, freezer safe clear containers. You can use them in the fridge or the freezer. How many times have you put something in a container that wasn't see-through, and then you find it months later in the fridge and you can hardly even recognize what it was? Clear storage containers is really helpful. And then anything that's going to perish quickly or you don't want to forget about, keep it in the front of your refrigerator so you see it when you open it up. Some tips for keeping certain produce. I mean, clearly, I think everybody knows, don't put bananas in the refrigerator. Um, don't refrigerate your tomatoes, your onions, your squash, or potatoes. The quality will suffer and the taste will suffer. Don't wash berries, soft fruits, until you're ready to eat them. I know I suggested washing some veggies in advance and putting them in a bowl. I should have specified. I would do that for anything you're planning to eat in the next couple of days. Anything that might sit longer, you might not want to cut it up yet. But those vegetables tend to be more sturdy than fruit. Fruit really has a tendency to spoil more quickly after it's been washed. So you might want to wait until you're ready to eat it. With leafy greens, you can go ahead and wash those in advance, kind of drain them, and then wrap them in a paper towel when you put them in the fridge, and that'll help capture some of that moisture. A tip that has helped a lot of people and was very helpful to me when I heard it is avocados. You buy them, they sit on the counter. Once they're ripe, you can put them in the fridge, and that will stop them from ripening and keep them where they're at. And you can use them a lot longer, so they don't have to be garbage. So and then clearly don't buy more than you can use. If you run out of something, use your freezer to shop from and go pull from there. Get your veggies, get the meat that you're ready to use, and then just try to remember as you're thawing it, you don't want to just set meat on the counter to thaw. You can put it in the fridge if you think of it in advance. Another way would be to keep it under a trickle of cool water in the sink and let that run for a little bit. But the trick is to use cold water and keep it flowing so the temperature of that meat never dips below the safety zones. Okay. Now, in terms of using those leftovers, so we talked about batch cooking, making extra when you are going through the process of meal planning, and then you can perhaps have dinner one night and then use the leftovers for lunch the next day. Saves you time, you're still eating great, healthy food, and you're not letting it waste. It's great to think about repurposing those leftover meats and proteins. And I would say use leftovers within 3 to 4 days is probably um, a good estimate for timing of those. So maybe if you grill some protein, maybe you grill some chicken one night, use the leftovers, throw it on a veggie salad the next day, throw it in a wrap, something like that. You can always, some other ideas, especially with veggies, you can throw it in pastas, in eggs, in soup. Think about ways that you can reuse those things. So tonight for dinner, I did a sheet pan of roasted and seasoned cauliflower. And I actually think that would be a nice addition to that grain bowl I mentioned, to use up the black beans as well, the eggs and black beans and some brown rice, some cauliflower and other vegetables, just as an example. So figuring out ways to make extra, save the cooking time the next day, and then what can you use it in later in that week? I even put on the slide the grain protein veggie bowls. It's a favorite of mine. Any whole grain paired with any protein with some vegetables, and then you can use different dressings for the flavoring and kind of soften it up a little bit. Toppings for baked potatoes, so leftover chili or leftover broccoli, bake a potato and put some broccoli and cheese on it. That's a great way to get a nice, easy lunch or dinner and use up some of those extra toppings. So be creative with that. Sharing with others. If you're not a huge fan of leftovers, I think in the house that I live in now and the house that I lived in last time, um, I had an older single person that lived right next to me, didn't like to cook a lot, and they loved when we shared leftovers with them. So those are, feel free to do that as well. It's way better than leaving it in your fridge and throwing it away in a few more days. So think of ways that you can maybe help other people out. And in terms of being creative, think about, if say you've got blueberries or apples in your fridge and they're getting a little soft, you don't want to eat them as they are. They would be great to throw in an oatmeal or a baked oatmeal. You can throw some veggie parts, if you were making like a soup stock, you had veggie peels and scraps, throw that in there and cook up a soup stock. Vegetables that are kind of starting to wilt, you can put them in some water and they'll perk up, or throw it in a stir fry or even a soup. So think about ways that, okay, this spinach isn't looking so great. I don't want to use it in a salad anymore, but I have a great soup recipe that calls for spinach, and that would be a perfect way to use that. And now clearly I'm not talking about rotten spinach, but once it's getting past its prime, it's still good, but maybe not as appealing to eat it raw in a salad anymore. So being creative, thinking about those kind of things so that you don't have to throw all of that stuff in the garbage can. And as I was sort of thinking through this presentation, I was thinking about eating out at restaurants. Imagine how much food is wasted at a restaurant. They take people's plates away, they scrape them. They must just go through pounds and pounds of garbage in terms of food um, a day. So think about asking for to-go containers right away. So this is a trick that I use with a lot of my clients who want to sort of watch their weight or eat a little bit healthier. Portion control, especially at restaurants, can be a little out of control depending on the restaurant. So, immediately cutting that big burger in half and taking the rest home for the next day, that sort of thing. Sharing. So maybe you have a taste for some French fries, but they're going to bring you like an entire plate of them. Can you share them with those at the table, instead of everybody getting their own and then leaving some behind? I've even asked that sometimes I get funny looks, but ask for smaller servings. Like, I want French fries, but give me like half of what you would normally give somebody. So think about ways that you're going to trim calories, um, you're going to trim the waste that happens, unless you're going to take it home and reuse it, throw it in the air fryer. That's an option too, but don't leave it behind, or don't order so much that you're gonna leave it behind. And then we all know restaurants that have giant portions, which sometimes is great if you want to get a couple meals from it. If that's not the plan, you're not going to be able to take leftovers with you because you're headed out after dinner. Then maybe just try share a meal with someone, or go somewhere that has smaller portions. And this actually, interestingly, got me thinking about school lunches too, for those of you who have kids. I have helped in the past when my kids were younger in their classroom, help the kids with lunch, and the amount of food that would go in the garbage can, it just made me sick. So I began telling some of the parents, I'm the dietitian who is telling on all the kids that, they really aren't liking the food and they're throwing it away. And they started asking their kids, what do you want in your lunch? And maybe you pack something from home instead of getting this hot lunch that they don't really like and they throw it away anyway. So conversations with your kids about that kind of stuff too. My kids I've always asked them to, whatever you don't eat in your lunch, bring it home. I mean, there's no sense in throwing away something that you haven't even opened or touched. Bring it back home and somebody else will eat it. Now, clearly it depends on what that was, but just making the point to think about that with your kids' lunches as well. So, a little bit of information here to get you thinking about how to not waste as much food. So, think about some things that you can do. Maybe you can set some goals that will benefit your health and reducing food waste to start meal planning, keeping a shopping list, shopping a little bit differently. Maybe some of you compost or would like to try composting. That's a great way to get rid of some of our organic food waste. Maybe for you, it's buying some uh, clear containers that are freezer friendly to help you freeze things that will save you time later because it's already there and ready for you. So save you time and money, actually. So thank you very much for tuning in. I listed some resources here as well as my email address, and I look forward to talking to you again. Thanks so much.